Have you seen the tapes is the question asked on the playlist found on the channel Jack-O-Lantern. Before you say anything, I'm disappointed in myself for not finding this sooner for the month of Halloween because of how fitting it is, but whatever. We're going to explore the channel now, and to hopefully pique your interest, I'll share a bit about what to expect. There's a kid who mysteriously went missing and no remains were recovered besides his camcorder. There's a location of a once joyful facility abruptly turned into an abandoned horror bunker, and a paranormal creature that takes a pumpkin scarecrow prop as its vessel that wants out. Oh, and a potential serial killer too. If that little teaser does pique your interest, then sit back, relax, get a snack, and as always, my name is Ripastrella. Let's explore. Have you seen the tapes playlist? This beginning segment will be a little confusing since I'll only go into detail later on, so bear with me, okay? The first tape has the name Henry in its title, which coincidentally is the name of the character who we will be following in the video. As for why Henry's recording, it's to document their adventures, and it's about them trying to find their friend in the forest. The only way Henry can find his friend is by contacting them through a walkie-talkie. However, the friend doesn't respond. Then suddenly, Henry hears something behind them and turns back to follow the noise, likely believing it's their friend Wyatt. Giggling soon could be heard, and through the walkie-talkie, Henry was instructed to go left. Static also started to take over the recording, and at some point, briefly flashing, we see text that reads, "Are you lost?" before suddenly we see the walkie-talkie on the ground, likely belonging to Henry's friend, and a mysterious figure stalking from behind a tree. We then cut away from that to a pumpkin with text that reads, "It's funny how they run," and then the letter C, and lastly a link to a website, which we'll get to later, because in the following video, we see an Archer Enterprise computer, specifically the desktop, with an interesting folder called Bearprook, which holds other folders inside, one of which having the same title as the previous video. Speaking of which, the folder titled Tape 2 Missing is the same title of the video we're watching now, meaning the contents inside is what will be shown. It's a video about Halloween safety, and its host is a cartoon pumpkin. It seems cute until static starts taking over the screen, and briefly flashing is text that reads, "Let me out." After this, it seems like someone's surfing through commercials, and unexpectedly, we see the footage of Henry in the forest before switching to a cartoon pumpkin giving advice, then a commercial about not letting kids be alone. Also, we get told the setting of the story, which could be Canada, and lastly, we get confirmation that Henry Thompson is in fact missing. We also see the letter E, and abruptly see footage of someone running in a tunnel with the sound of laughter behind them, but before they could turn back, the file deleted itself because it was unauthorized access. And since someone is still using the desktop, they quickly shut down the computer after this whole mess, and we see orange text that says, "It's now safe to turn off your computer." How reassuring! We see the familiar link again at the end of the video, and moving on to the next tape, it has the word help in its title, which is fitting because the footage is someone wandering in a building and strange noises could be heard all around them. It seems like a tense environment, but the most interesting thing is the text that flashes on the screen. Would you, could you, help me? We also get shown Henry's missing poster again, and then the pumpkin with text saying, "Interesting, you made it inside. Welcome back." And just like before, the video ends with a link and a letter, which is L this time. But moving on to the next tape, which has the word hide in its title. It opens with unauthorized access, then codes, then a loading screen, and lastly, footage of someone cautiously looking around in a building, and in the background is a voice coming from the intercoms. Bearbrook Bunker is closed, and anyone inside is instructed to leave through the blast tunnels. As for those who are lost, they're instructed to find staff members. However, the voice from the intercom started to corrupt at the end of their message, which likely made the cameraman become more tense because they turned around after hearing the sound of a locker. However, before we get shown more, static takes over with a few glitches, and later, two beaded red eyes stared at the screen with text that reads, "You look familiar." And just like before, it ends with a letter, it being T this time, and the link. Next up is a tape that has the word offline, and it opens with the same red beady eyes from before, however more text that reads, "We brought you here for a reason. Accept it." We then switch to an Orchard Enterprise computer, and someone enters an override key which shows footage of someone still exploring the strange bunker, and the intercom turns back on. The speaker gives instructions to the poor souls trapped inside the facility to hide until a staff member can find them in the morning. As for the reason why they have to hide, there's likely something dangerous out to get them, which could explain why the person holding the camera is so tense and likely being chased. Also flashing on the screen, we see a disturbing looking face before the footage soon ends and we see the letter I and the link once more. The next tape's keyword is tutorial, and it opens with Archer Enterprise's training cassette. It is confidential and shouldn't be copied or distributed outside of the Enterprise, but as always, we're rule breakers and we're still going to watch. Now, what's so important about this cassette tape? It's a tutorial about carving pumpkins. How interesting. And the speaker is an irritated man who claims he's not doing this because he's being blackmailed. How reassuring. Also, interrupting the footage are short clips of someone inside a bathroom, but back to the speaker. He covers himself a bit due to the fact that he's pantsless, and states that he's the junior champion of pumpkin carving. And while listing the steps to carve a good pumpkin, the second step was an interesting one because he says to find a knife, but he also specifies to find a knife that isn't bloody or has fingerprints. Strange, but okay. Also, the person behind the camera is likely instructing him to try to be more PG since they had to take a few takes, but he got it right eventually. Haha. He then tells us an acronym, always be creative but not too creative, and he quickly insults whoever created that before continuing on by thanking the viewers for watching Wyatt's scholarly carving, but the person behind the camera told him that's not the title, which made Wyatt irritated and storm off. And interestingly enough, or it could be a coincidence, but I doubt it, Wyatt is the same name Henry called out in the first video. Could they be one and the same? Maybe. But let's now return back to the footage interrupting the tutorial. First we see a bathroom as I mentioned before, and something is banging on the doors. After this, we see a security door with a danger sign, but the cameraman continues to push forward despite what the intercom is saying, and in the end of the video, we see the letter C, text that reads, "One remains," and a link. Now, continuing on to the following video, the main word in the title is no, repeated multiple times, and the video itself shows an alarm echoing in the mysterious facility, then a bunch of flashing images, such as Henry's missing poster and Orchard Enterprises logo, which is a pumpkin. But switching away from that, we hear someone's voice and see them driving on a road. Apparently, the speaker received a call to investigate the decommissioned bunker, which they soon arrived at, and they walked down a familiar tunnel before going down an elevator, and during the transition, we see static and text that reads, "You should leave." And during the elevator ride, we get told the owner of the facility asked the investigator to check out a Halloween prop, specifically a scarecrow pumpkin, and the investigator soon arrives at level A100, which they believe they're in the correct place, but static text appears saying they're wrong. Regardless, the investigator continues to wander until we abruptly switch to dark footage and slowly look up at the prop that was mentioned before. We also briefly see static and get more text which says, "Who are you?" Back to the investigator, they go on to explain that the employees started to feel uneasy around the prop because they feel like they're being watched, and they hear voices while alone with it. Not only that, but parents claim their children developed night terrors and sleep paralysis after taking photos with that prop. This caused a lot of lawsuits, so the prop was put into storage for the time being, and the investigator says this situation should be something regular. Specifically, it's a Class 5. They soon pulled out a spirit box, and now it's abundantly clear this investigator is one that investigates the paranormal. We soon learn that the investigator's name is Ben, and they proceed to ask questions to the prop, one being, what's its name? The entity responded by saying their name is Jack, and this fast response stunned Ben for a moment, but things soon got worse when all the devices, including the lights, turned off. Luckily, Ben had a backup light but realized that the head slightly moved, and static interrupted the footage with text that confirms that it did move its head. Ben then managed to turn the spirit box back on and asked what they can do to help the spirit move on, to which Jack responds by wanting to be let out. Ben says that's why he's here, however we see text interrupting again, calling him a liar. Jack then asked if Ben is lost, to which Ben says that he's here to help again. But then Jack says that he killed someone. The pumpkin then started to light up as if there was a fire inside it, and flashing on the screen we see text that reads, "You made this choice." Obviously after this, Ben proceeded to run as the alarms played in the background and the intercom told him to not open the blast tunnels after hours due to casualties that could happen. We also continued to see more text which reads, "You could have said no. Was it worth it?" Ben then managed to enter the elevator, however something pried the doors open, and it's noticeably the scarecrow pumpkin prop with a roaring fire still inside it. Ben screams out and everything corrupts until we see the number 91 and a link. A lot of stuff, I know. The reason why all of this would be confusing to a new viewer is because the link that we constantly see at the end of each video is a vital tool for extra information, and technically there's more videos on the channel. However, I'm going to stop here so we can move on to the website segment, and we'll bring up the other videos if they're needed. So let's go. Jack-o'-lantern website. Let's first begin with the Danny tapes. In tape 1, we hear Danny, who's an employee that works in the facility, and in the recording he shares his sympathy towards someone named Morse for losing his grandfather. Speaking of which, Morse's grandfather is actually the one who runs the company with the bunker, but now that he's gone, Morse is taking over, so there's kind of a bright side, but not really. It's a simple first tape that introduces us to a few characters, but then once we go on to tape 3, Danny shares his concerns about the missing kid named Henry, and the fact that there's evidence that was left behind in the bunker, which was his camcorder. Danny doesn't want to brush this under the rug even if a body wasn't recovered, and he wants to look more into it, but claims that he's not going to ruin the company's name. Now moving on to tape 4 and 5, Danny managed to get his hands on the footage from the camcorder, which sadly the police doesn't seem to take seriously, because it just shows a kid wandering around, but regardless, Danny still feels uneasy from the footage, and he wants Morris to return his calls. Now tape 6, in which Danny is in the bunker alone after hours in order to investigate, and while in the boiler room, Danny found blood, broken equipment, and he points out that the elevator is broken. Because of this, he has a suspicion there's something in the facility, and he also points out that he can't find the pumpkin prop anywhere. After this, he might have entered the tunnel, which caused complications according to the noises heard in the background, and we also hear at the end of the tape an ominous voice, which could be the pumpkin prop. That's the end of the Danny tapes. All of this is important because it means some of the footage that we saw previously could have been from that kid who somehow ended up in the bunker. How else could the camcorder be in the bunker if Henry didn't went down there, right? And it can't be Ben, the paranormal investigator whose footage we saw in the beginning parts, because he hightailed it to the elevator, so the first couple of footage we saw was either Henry, maybe Danny if he was snooping around, but I'm positive that it's Henry. Correct me if I'm wrong though. Now, who's the big bad of the series? The Scarecrow pumpkin prop, of course, but we also get told more information about the prop. In Danny's second tape, we learn that Morris, the new owner, dislikes the prop and asks for the employees to throw it out. However, because of nostalgia, they kept it in storage. This is obviously a critical mistake since Kid went missing and the prop is likely to blame for it, but then again, I doubt any of the employees expected this to happen. Besides that, from everything we've seen so far, the pumpkin is adamant of wanting to be let out, so maybe it's just lashing out because it's trapped. Also in the tapes, we get more information on Wyatt. For example, confirmation that he's an employee of the facility and is considered the second in command. Well, I'm gonna be honest, Wyatt doesn't exactly seem like a sane person from what we saw, which makes me, think there's more to this character than just some random employee. More on that later because I want to circle back to Morris. According to Danny, he hasn't returned to the facility in a while, and Danny struggled to contact him. As for the only other information we get on Morris, it's through his logs that we can freely access on the website. In these logs, it's clear that Morris doesn't like Danny, and after Danny was caught breaching the blast tunnels, he was soon fired. We also learn Morris is the one who hired Ben, the paranormal investigator, to investigate the prop, which is interesting because why was a paranormal investigator one of the first things he thought of to deal with this problem? That's not exactly a normal response. This must mean that Morris knows a lot more about this strange situation, and according to the logs, he states that a disturbing creature's aura is spreading throughout the facility, which he must be talking about the pumpkin, and this could be the reason behind why he dislikes the prop. Besides the lawsuits, there was already some history, and he knows there's something attached to the prop, which is also connected to the facility and likely the whole area in general. At least after what happened to Ben. By the way, he didn't went missing or was found dead, he just never returned. Regardless, Morris decided to shut down the facility after that, which is great. However, I doubt that's gonna stop people from trespassing, and the aura this creature is spreading might just get worse and worse over time. But let's step away from that for a moment. What is this facility? From what I can gather, it's supposed to be a fun place for families to visit, I think. However, I believe there's something more sinister happening in the facility. Look at this photo. Cognitive testing. If this isn't the facility, why? Are people's cognitions being altered? If that's the case, is this really the paranormal or someone tricking your mind? Maybe the prop isn't actually possessed and it's someone in a costume, and they're altering your reality to make you an easy target while inside or around the facility. Or I'm just completely wrong because there's more videos in the series, and one of these videos shows a guy who's somehow transported to a different location, which is pretty supernatural, and if someone's cognition is being altered, it would be happening in their brains, their mind's eye, and not a camera, so I don't know. I hate Morse code and I couldn't figure out the password for the website ? Page. So let me ramble a bit. If there's some hidden information that I missed, I'm sorry, I tried. Let me have these assumptions, because that's all I got. Anyways, let's now return to Wyatt since I did say we'll return to him. At first, I assumed he could have been responsible for Henry's disappearance and could have potentially dressed up as the pumpkin creep. However, there's an interview video on the channel with Wyatt, and he talks about being chased down by that pumpkin thing during an unauthorized visit. We also learn Morris fired him after a week of taking over the company, and towards the end of the interview, Wyatt was asked an ominous question of whether people would realize if he went missing. So I guess he's kind of off the list of suspects, but he might be on a hit list, so yikes. Speaking of interviews, there's another character named Adeline, and during her interview, a question that was asked was why she took her eyes off of Henry, which made her antsy. And in a separate video, we see a news article which goes on into more detail about the night Henry went missing. It was August 25, an asylum-scapee was on the loose, and Adeline was Henry's babysitter, so that's the connection between those two. But the most important thing about this interview was the fact that Adeline had to sign an NDA, so someone is trying to keep her quiet about whatever's happening. And besides NDAs, there's other ways that they're keeping people quiet, like murder. You see, I'm pretty sure Ben got shot at and then buried when, he had a desire to expose everything. Oh, right, yes, Ben, the paranormal investigator, does make a return in another video, but was confronted by a dark, mysterious figure. A lot of stuff is happening around this facility, okay? So yeah, recommend to sign the NDA rather than dying. Obvious choice, what am I talking about? But anyways, there's also something to do with an old burnt down steeple. Remember when I briefly mentioned an explorer who somehow transported to a location? It almost seemed like they kind of went back in time when everything was preserved, at least that's my interpretation. Anyways, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we see that same location in a separate video with someone who's recording and being followed by an ominous noise along with the sound of bells behind them echoing. I'm not fully positive who it is or how important this video is, however, in this series, everything shown is likely important, so I'm bringing it up just in case, and at the end of that footage, we see a bloody handprint, so I doubt it ended well. Regardless, what are steeples? They're a church tower or spire. And whenever you think of a church, you think of angels and God, but sometimes you think of the dark side and think of demons and devils. Maybe this pumpkin is possessed by a devil for all we know. A lot of religious people always say Halloween is a holiday for sinners, so maybe that's the connection here. But here's the strange thing. There's also this other video on the channel which shows a TV that broadcasts the news, and they talk about an infamous killer that the police are struggling to catch, and there's actually a witness. However, before we get told more, a mysterious person slams down a mask on the table, and the TV turns off. This might imply that the person is the killer, and we also see them in the facility doing who knows what. Now, I don't know if this killer has something to do with the creepy pumpkin paranormal creature. I don't even know if they're one and the same, working together, or if it's a similar case to Jekyll and Hyde. I doubt that last part. But I do know for certain that this mysterious character behind the mask is important in the second part of the series, and is obsessively collecting information, mainly photos, and they have a strange watch with a bunch of numbers being collected, and as I mentioned before, they're in the bunker, so I'm assuming that's their home base. Not only that, but remember when I mentioned the news article that talked about Henry's disappearance? It mentioned an asylum escapee, so maybe there's a connection there as well. Maybe the escapee is that mysterious person, but if that's the case, why did they choose the facility? I've never been the best at solving puzzles if it wasn't obvious, and I'm really challenging myself here. Is there a hidden piece of information that I couldn't find that could give me these answers to my questions? If there is, please tell me in the comments. Now let's move on to the conclusion. Conclusion! Halloween is meant to be fun and games with a few tricks here and there, but suddenly a kid went missing, there's something paranormal happening in a bunker that's using a pumpkin scarecrow pop as its vessel, there's a serial killer on the loose, there's sketchy stuff happening in the closed facility, and information is trying to be concealed by eliminating people who could spread the information by forcing them to sign NDAs or being murdered. Oh, and there's something to do with a burned down steeple that I don't fully know too much connections with, okay? This is a very rough rundown, but that's because I already said a lot when talking about the website. And since we reached the end of my video, I want to turn to you all for help. This is genuinely a really cool project, and it's frustrating that not that many people are talking about it. Usually when I make videos like these, I always like looking at other people's opinions, but there were so few, and it made me so sad because it's clear how much effort is put into this project. So here's my challenge. Solve some puzzles, do what I can't, prove that you're superior, and come back here and tell me your discoveries. Specifically with any Morse code stuff, because I'm struggling. And if this is important for later, here are all the letters that I collected, including some numbers. They're very easy to find, they're usually at the end of each video, but here you go. Take them. I tried typing that into the website for the password, and it didn't work, so maybe I'm too late, or I'm missing something. Regardless, let's stop here before my brain starts to actually explode. The links to everything is in the description, and as always, my name is Rip Estrella. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do that funny little notification thing, maybe leave a comment, here's my social medias, and better not catch you dying on me. Goodbye!